So this work that you're about to hear about is the work that Secretary Redmond talked about in his speech. It's the work that we've been talking about a lot. It's the folks who are doing the work around the Texas Climate Jobs Project. Our project to create over 1 million new union jobs in the state of Texas alone and saving our planet at the same time. So I'm excited to hear about this work. In order to do it, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director of the Texas Climate Jobs Project, Mr. Bo Delp. Bo?
Thank you so much, Rick. Can we give it up for Secretary Redmond just one more time? That was so awesome. That was so cool. I think all of us were kind of looking at each other backstage thinking, that's a tough act to follow, you know. But it was really, really great. My name is Bo Delp. I'm the Executive Director of Texas Climate Jobs Project. I want to tell you a little bit about the project and what we're up to, but we also have a great group of people up here who really represent the diversity of the Texas labor movement and come at this work for all kinds of different reasons. So before I get too deep into talking about Texas climate jobs and hearing from our panel, I'd love it if we could just quickly, maybe everybody could introduce themselves and let everybody know who you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Gonzalez. I am the business manager of Labor's International Union, Local 1095.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bakeyah Nelson, and I'm a consultant working with the HIVE Fund for Climate and Gender Justice.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Gonzalez. I am the business manager, financial secretary for IBEW, Local Union 716 in Houston, Texas.
Larry Burchfield, the director of District 13 for the United Steelworkers. Big shout out to all my steelworkers.
I'm Britni Cuington. I'm a local job steward for CWA Local 6215 out of Dallas, Texas.
And I'm Wayne Lord. I'm the business manager for Plumbers Local 68 along the Texas Gulf Coast. And go Astros.
All right. Okay. Wow, shots fired already. So let me tell you a little bit about Texas Climate Jobs Project and what we're up to. Everybody up here has a really important role to play in our work. A couple of years ago, the Texas AFL-CIO and many of you, labor unions from across the state, got together and talked about what a labor-led vision around climate change could look like. And people were coming to the conversation for all kinds of different reasons. People were coming to the conversation because their members were talking about climate change or were impacted by climate change. People whose neighborhoods had not been invested in for a long time, who, when there's a flood, when there's a hurricane, when there's an extreme weather event, it floods there first. And so people are feeling the impacts. In other circumstances, there are brand new industries that were starting to emerge in the state. And the question was, what kind of jobs are these going to be? And so the Texas AFL got everybody together and said, what does a worker-led, union-led agenda look like around climate change? And so for about a year, everybody got together and put together a report that was issued by us and Cornell University that put out a blueprint that we still follow that said if we do everything we need to do as a state around carbon emissions, we can also create 1 million new union jobs. And that's what we're all about. We want to make sure that these industries are union and that everybody has a good job. And so from that, in one of the last constitutional conventions we had, we got together and endorsed the proposal and said, Texas Climate Jobs Project, take this report and actually make something out of it, because a report's just a report. We got to do the strategic organizing and the work necessary to actually build the labor movement in these sectors. And so we built out an advisory board. Right now there's about 22, 23 different labor organizations that are part of that advisory board that shape our work. So we don't really have an agenda at Texas Climate Jobs Project outside of what our advisory board really wants us to focus on. And I think we've had a lot of success. But before I get too deep into everything that we're doing, I want to hear from some of the people. Let me give you all just a real quick overview of our priorities at Texas Climate Jobs Project, and then Britni, I have a question for you. Our focus is really making sure that all these clean energy workers these jobs that are being created are union jobs. Whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's clean hydrogen, whether it's any of these new industries, offshore wind that are starting to emerge, we want to make sure that they're good jobs. We're also really focused on making sure that when more energy efficient fiber broadband is expanded into low-income neighborhoods, that work be done union. We'll hear more about that. We also are thinking a lot about school buildings and buildings generally. Buildings emit a lot of carbon emissions. If we can retrofit those buildings by having more energy efficient HVAC, by adding windows that are more energy efficient, and solar on the roof, that's going to create energy savings for the building owner, and we want to make sure that work is done by students and graduates of DO registered apprenticeship programs. We're also really focused on some of the industries that are connected to the oil and gas industry. Texas, for a long time, has been an oil and gas state, and many unionized workers work in the oil and gas industry. And we see new jobs being created in things like carbon capture and things like hydrogen. We want to talk about what those jobs are going to look like. And then finally, a key role that we play is providing technical assistance to labor unions. Let me give you one number that always sticks out to me. Over the next 10 years, the Inflation Reduction Act, there's going to be $66 billion flowing into this state just from that one piece of legislation. It's going to create a lot of jobs. It's very technical, and we want to make sure that those jobs are union. But enough from me. Let's hear a little bit from people on our panel. I want to start with you, Britni, if that's okay. So, Britni, we've been working with y'all at Texas Climate Jobs Project and CWA to build out this community labor partnership in Dallas around fiber broadband. And I'm hoping that you can tell everybody here just a little bit about what y'all are fighting for and why it's important to you and y'all's local.
Okay, cool. For CWA, they created what's now called the Broadband Brigade in 2020, centered around the Infrastructure Jobs Act, that allocated $64 billion around the country to different states to improve internet quality around the country. And they go to areas of most need first. So that's where I hopped in on this. I was asked to be on the brigade because I am a Prem Tech by trade. That means I install internet, install, repair, all types of different mediums for internet. And to explain to you why I'm sitting here on the stage, all you have to do is Google AT&T and LED and Wall Street Journal, So just to give you a little bit of background on that, we want to make sure that these jobs are safe and that I'm able to continue doing my job safely, but not just me, everyone. And Texas Climate Jobs Project has been like a godsend when it comes to community collaborations, because for anyone to get on board with anything that you're doing, especially when it comes to labor, you have to make it real to them. But internet is real to everybody. We've seen now that the internet, broadband, internet access, quality internet is a utility at this point. It's no longer, something that you're privileged to have. It's almost a right at this point, and it should be a right at this point. But out of that $64 billion, Texas got $3.3 billion, which is the most out of any other state. The next closest was California with 1.8, so they're not even touching us when it comes to that. But we want to make sure that Texas spends that money the right way. We want to make sure that they're doing that with fiber as a preference, because if you're using lead or copper or any other medium other than fiber, it's not environmentally responsible, and it's not safe. It's no longer that way. So somehow they put the lowest person on the total pole on a state board to help help them decide how they're going to spend this money when it comes to workforce development and the economy. And I'm just going to make sure that I mess it up as much as I can before they realize the mistake they made and kick me out. But but I want to make sure that. But through Texas Climate Jobs Project, we've been able to not only coalition build at the local level, but at the state level, and we're going out into the community and getting the leaders and the activists that are in your community making it real to them, explaining to them why this is important, why it's important that fiber is the preference as opposed to any other medium, and why it's important that these workers out here, especially since House Bill 2127, I don't have to repeat what he said, but ever since that passed, we want to make sure that they get quality pay and health benefits, and because you really just don't want someone installing your internet that gets paid $9 to $12 an hour. Like, what is working in the Texas heat? I mean, it's 107 today. Like, imagine what your internet would look like with somebody getting paid $9 an hour to do that. It just doesn't make sense. So we've been able to partner. We officially have 28 partnering organizations through our Dallas coalition that fight with us with going to city council meetings, scheduling meetings with county officials and staff, and we help educate them on the process and why this is important to us and why it should be important to them, because at the end of the day, they're gonna be the ones making the decisions on how this money should be spent. And it's great to get that collaboration because it doesn't really exist anywhere else, especially when you're talking about in the labor movement. It's usually just us, AFL-CIO, or our local CLCs, but we've been able to partner with churches, schools, other partner like the Poor People's Campaign, other organizations that wouldn't normally fit into our little niche, but they do because everybody needs internet.
Thank you so much, Britni. Wow, such cool work. I want to pass it over to Brother Wayne Lord. Let me say something about UA. You know, UA from the beginning, Wayne, has been, I think, shown such leadership in this work and really shaping what Texas Climate Jobs Project should be all about. And I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about why y'all did that, why y'all got involved, and why is this project important to UA?
Well, it's really simple. It's about jobs. It's that simple. Texas Climate Jobs Project, one of the first things we had to do when we affiliated or got together, started discussing ideas, was how to take the fear factor out of our very own members. Because a large majority of our members are in the fossil fuel business. That's what they do. They're very good at it, and they're good jobs. They have health benefits, everything you want. So sometimes when you see activists come out and they first thing out of their mouth is, we're shutting down all the fossil fuel facilities, for power generation, we're doing away with all the natural gas. Well, that automatically throws up, some warning flags for our members. And being a plumber, we've dealt with water conservation for the last 25 years. So it's a little bit more in our culture. But the pipe fitters, the welders, HVAC techs, they were frightened for their jobs. And the first thing that Bo did was kind of sign a couple of staff members, and we went out, talked to several large groups of apprentices and members and things like that, and spoke to them about what that transition would look like. Because when we weld, we don't care what goes through that pipe. It can be hydrogen, it can be carbon, carbon dioxide, it can be geothermal steam, anything. So we can transition from fossil fuels over to those new technologies real easily. And we have the knowledge, we have the experience. So that's what we had to just kind of let our members know. This is about what we do well already, and we can bring that expertise into these fields and maybe help improve it. Don't run away from innovation, run to it. And that's always been a mantra for the UA as long as I've been associated with it. And one of the other projects that we did, that we started, was the carbon-free schools, and that has worked out really well. And our members could see from that, that's direct jobs. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's our guys going out doing that work, but not just our guys, all the unions doing those jobs. And that's what benefits. With all the infrastructure monies coming, we have to get set up and put something in place that we could take advantage of and make sure they understand what the standards are that we're asking for. We've been involved with offshore wind. And people ask, what the hell's a plumber doing in offshore wind? I can't tell you how many times I've answered that question. But it's not directly offshore wind. It's about the labor standards that are set up in those agreements. You know, we're setting a boilerplate for later on when we have the carbon capture, when we have the hydrogen, all those monies coming in from the infrastructure bills. So wind plays a vital role in what we're trying to accomplish just simply by setting the labor standards up. And we've done a great job. I believe sincerely that the Climate Jobs Project has put labor in a lot of places that we weren't able to get to. As a building trades guy, if they hear building trades, those developers, everybody, they go running. And the first thing we can do, we're already in the room a lot of times when we mention Texas Climate Jobs Project. That is how we get into those rooms. And nobody does, when we start talking about workforce training, nobody does workforce training or apprenticeship training better than the DOL-approved apprenticeship programs through the unions. Matter of fact, the one that I represent with the plumbers, it's the oldest one in the state of Texas. We're 85 years old. So we must be doing something right. So. And that's just a testament to all the DOL programs. We invest, our contractors invest in us. And it's a partnership with industry. And that's what Texas Climate Jobs Project does, is promote those partnerships, but set the standards. They want to see those workforce training and PLA agreements and all that stuff, setting those standards when that money comes from from Department of Energy or wherever it comes from the federal government. And I will say real quickly that the Texas Climate Jobs Project is where it's at because the guy sitting right here in the middle is the moderator. Bo Delp has gone through so many different hurdles and challenges and actually has made this just one of the best programs in the entire country. So I would like to give a round of applause for Bo.
Well, I appreciate that, Wayne, but I got to say also, I think Texas Climate Jobs Project staff are, if y'all can raise your hand so everybody can see, let's see, do I see you out there? Everybody get up for Texas Climate Jobs Project staff, because this work isn't possible without them. We got Sam Ramirez and Rebecca and Cece and Chris Drago, they're just great people. So thank y'all so much for all the work that y'all do.
Bo, if I could interrupt, I just want to know, was that Rick's idea to put 3 bottles of water in front of 7 people on the stage?
I'm just trying to figure out if I have to pay $5 for it or not, like in my room.
Rick said he's trying to conserve. Yeah,
He did say, share the mic, share the water.
Oh my goodness. Well, look, I'm really glad you brought up, oil and gas. Because I think for a lot of people it's really personal. You know, I grew up in an oil and gas family, and it's still to this day, every time I oh my goodness, wow. Give it up for Rick Levy, everybody. Yeah, look, I mean, it's personal for people. Every time I smell this gasoline, I think about my grandfather because I grew up in an oil and gas family. So I know it's supported a lot of people in this state for a long time. And I think when we started this project, climate groups would come to us and say, "Hey, can y'all work with us? We're trying to shut down a coal power plant." And we say, "Well, what about the jobs?" And they say, "Well, people are going to go out to West Texas and install solar panels for half the pay and no benefits." And, we said, well, that doesn't really work. And so one of the things we've really tried to do is bring the worker conversation to the climate groups. And we've been really successful, but there's a lot of work left to do. And so speaking about the oil and gas industry, Larry, I'd love to get your perspective on this. The steel workers in the Gulf represent a lot of oil and gas workers. And so I just would love to get your perspective, and if you could share with everybody, what are y'all doing at the table here? Why is this work important to y'all, and how do y'all see yourselves fitting in as the steelworkers?
No, great. I appreciate that, Bo. I'm sure many of my brothers and sisters with the United Steelworkers sitting in your audience today are wondering the same thing. We came on board with the Texas Climate Jobs Project to see what we were doing. The oil and gas industry, which I'm a product of, I came out of a refinery before coming to work for the International Union, understand that what's going on in that industry is other technologies are taking over some of the energy, a decline in some of the biofuel usage and the fossil fuel. It sort of positions us to a point where there's a lot of scrutiny on the industry itself, such as carbon capturing, the hydrogen hubs, right, and sequestration. And so when I look at the work that we're doing, the infrastructure money that's coming in, this federal investment that you heard Fred Redmond talk about when he was up here, these are the projects we have to be in front of as oil and gas workers to get that infrastructure money spent appropriately to keep all of our existing facilities open today. If we don't get to the control of the carbon capturing, the sequestration and so forth, and the hydrogen hubs, we won't be in business long term. They'll be looking to do what they're already doing, is importing. But more importantly than that, once we get past just the initial needs of what we need to keep open these sectors, the groups that we already have across the Texas Gulf Coast, and I have more than 7,000 members on the Texas Gulf Coast, all in that industry. But I have more around it. There's all of our other workers. We're a manufacturing union. All of them requiring energy to work. So in the room, even here today, I got plenty of paper workers in here, rubber workers with us today, all out of the steelworker organization, and glass that require that energy. Whether that energy is coming from the solar panels, the battery manufacturing, that come out of chemical grades that we already have, or if it's going to come from these offshore wind platforms that Brother Lord was talking about. But the more involvement we get out of Texas Climate Jobs Project to get in and get the labor standards that were mentioned in the forefront, whether it's for the trades initially, but for us to pick those jobs up as a manufacturing union and getting there to organize and build on the work that we're doing on the forefront. So as I see the United Steelworkers position to this is much like if we look back a little ways, there are plenty of organizations that had they have adapted, they'd still be here today. If you look at Sears should be Amazon. It was Sears and Roebuck. They did nothing to morph themselves as they seen imminent change come and they got wiped out. If you look at Blockbusters, they got wiped out by Netflix. Not moving with technology, not adapting to what was there to secure their own business. So as we look like getting involved as an international union, let's preserve our spot. Let's make sure that we're doing what we need to do to adapt and pull in those jobs and have a just transition to clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you. Really appreciate that, Larry. That's a great perspective. I want to ask real quick, Bakeyah. I'd like to ask you a question. Let me brag on Bakeyah for a second. But Bakeyah, like she said, she works with the HIVE Fund, and I got to tell y'all, they are really focused down in a very specific part of Houston. And from the outset, the HIVE Fund said we want to have labor at the table. And I want to tell y'all something. Not every foundation feels that way. Not every foundation gets unions. They don't understand it. Some of them are kind of hostile to unions. But to Bakeyah's credit and the HIVE Fund, y'all put labor at the table at the outset and asked us what's important to you, how can we work together, and I just want to really lift that up and honor it because it can be rare in this work. But I'd like to dig into that a little bit more and ask you, why did y'all want unions at the table? What are y'all trying to get done in Northeast Houston? Maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about what the HIVE Fund is working on.
Sure. And thanks for that, Bo. And again, I am working with the HIVE Fund for Climate and Gender Justice. And the HIVE Fund is, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, it's an intermediary funder that raises funds to make grants to groups that are building power to accelerate an equitable transition to cleaner, renewable energy and advocating to move away from dirty energy sources in the U.S. South. So I will say in full disclosure, I am one of those who one of the activists who would be coming and saying, hey, let's move away from the polluting facilities. But we also recognize that jobs are critical, and not just jobs, but good jobs are critical in order to facilitate this energy transition. So the Northeast Houston Collaborative that Bo was talking about formed after the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, and that this is an initiative that is funded by the HIVE Fund. And the idea was to bring organizations together to create a vision for Northeast Houston that could be accelerated by these federal climate investments to ensure a more resilient and equitable future for Northeast Houston. The collaborative is made up of a range of organizations, including environmental justice organizations, policy advocacy organizations, and of course, labor through Texas Climate Jobs. And it was critical for the HIVE Fund to make sure that labor was represented from the very beginning in the work, not only because it's the right thing to do morally, but because it's also mission critical to addressing the climate crisis. So we also recognize that there's this historical tension between addressing environmental justice concerns and meeting labor demands as well. But we also recognize that as this green economy emerges, all workers from all backgrounds should be able to have dignified jobs with thriving wages. So in acknowledging all of this, this requires us to talk to each other so we can better understand each other. And once we create these open lines of communication and build trust, we can start to build a common agenda and fight alongside each other to demand federal investments with our public dollars and make sure that they're used to create good jobs. And so we hope to create this space where the groups involved can build that common vision, foster solidarity toward addressing environmental justice while also being attentive to how the energy transition will impact workers, and ensuring that we support the policies that should be put in place and enforced for private industries to be able to access public capital. And that's really what's happening with the IRA right now and other pieces of federal legislation. So all of us, we should all expect that with public investments that there is a public return. And we can't realize those returns without good jobs. And in fact, if we don't have good jobs, we're going to be paying twice. Once for the initial capital, and again for the externalized costs when companies refuse workers health insurance, paid maternity leave, thriving wages to buy decent housing and healthy food. If we don't require these things, the cost of care, the cost of housing, and all of that will end up coming from the public as well. So beyond the moral imperative, there is also an economic imperative for all of us to ensure that these federal investments lead to good jobs. And that is what we hope to achieve by working with Texas Climate Jobs.
Thank you so much, Bakeyah. Matt? Matt, the laborers, you and I have worked together for a long time now. And I think back to my days at the Workers' Defense Project, where we would try to figure out ways to raise the floor for workers in the construction industry. And I think the laborers have really pushed to get living wages and basic OSHA 10 safety training and apprenticeship requirements on all kinds of publicly funded projects, because it's the right thing to do. I'm curious if you can talk to us just a little bit about some of these industries that we're working on together. How are the laborers impacted in these industries today, and what do y'all look for as a better future for the laborers in the industry that you work?
Yes, thank you for the question. So as Bo mentioned, we go back many years. Together we served on the Bond Oversight Committee for Austin Independent School District, where we fought feverishly to try to establish OSHA 10, OSHA 30 requirements, local hiring, workers' comp, and other what we considered low-hanging fruit, and the right thing to do for the district. Unfortunately, we had district staff fight us tooth and nail, and so we had to walk away from that fight. And more recently, kudos to the local labor organization and organizations in Austin, they achieved a great victory in accomplishing some of those requirements. But as we think about the larger picture as it pertains to other communities across the state, LiUNA continues to fight in establishing basic worker protections, rest break ordinances, living wage or prevailing wage, whichever is higher of the two. Because in Texas, laborers don't prevail. We still sit at an abysmal $8 to $12 an hour. With today's cost of living, nobody can survive on that. And so we also continue to try and work with local entities, municipalities, to educate them about the opportunities of partnering with unions and their registered apprenticeship programs, and more recently, because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan bill, the ability for them to access those federal funds by partnering with those registered apprenticeship programs, which in turn opens the door for the membership within each local union that has such a program. And so, beyond that, educating the community. When this HB 2127 was voted in, it was a punch in the gut to all of the labor organizations who have fought feverishly for a decade plus and trying to get these worker protections established for Austin and Houston, Dallas and Harris County, Travis County. And so, when it was signed into law, we all kind of looked at each other internally and said, we want to remain committed to find a way around this disastrous bill, which harms workers. It's unconscionable that Governor Abbott would sign such anti-worker legislation into law, and then immediately after, we saw an increase in heat-related illnesses and even worse, death. Just another sign that the Texas GOP puts profits over people. It's unfortunate, but that's where we're at. And so as we have conversations amongst ourselves with our brothers and sisters in different organizations, we try and find places of mutual interest where we can partner and elevate these conversations, because with that collaboration, we know that there is a lot more success.
Thank you, Matt. Well, my last question is for Stephen Gonzales, the IBEW. IBEW, I love the IBEW. Look, IBEW in many ways is at the center of this. When we think about so much of the transition, it's impacted y'all's members. There are new opportunities for growth because of the increase in clean energy technologies, and y'all are still dealing with non-union subcontractors that pay low wages and don't pay good benefits and have really quick on-the-job training. So when y'all see this opportunity, what is the IBEW doing to really seize this opportunity that you see?
Well, thanks for that question, Bo. First, I want to shout out to all my IBEW brothers and sisters in here. Shout out to our Vice President, Chris Wagner here. To be honest with you, what we've been doing to seize the moment. First, I want to shout out to probably the most pro-union president of my lifetime, Joe Biden, and what he has been doing for all unions. When he first implemented this IRA, the Infrastructure Reduction Act, a lot of us didn't quite understand it. Just like you mentioned earlier, Bo, that there's about $66 billion that are coming to Texas, potential, because of this IRA. And in Houston, the IBEW, we're embracing these changes, and we're also thinking outside the norm a lot because of this. For starters, the EV charging stations can only be installed by contractors with electricians that have certain certifications. And guess where they have to get these certifications? They have to get them from the JATCs. Electrical vehicle, what's called the EVITP, which is the Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program. It's written in the IRA that the contractors that want these charging station projects, they must get their electricians either from the IBEW or sign a PLA to get the training from us. Because of this, every single apprentice that goes through our JATC will be EVITP trained. Thanks. And because of that, we have grown our JTC in Houston by 100%. And I'll explain to you in a minute. We usually bring in about 100 apprentices every year, 100 to 110. This year alone, in August, we'll have over 200 to 225 brand new apprentices that are getting into this industry, whether it's the charging stations, solar, the electrical industry, for one. It's crazy. It's crazy. Second, I want to talk a little bit about the solar. We had to think outside the box on this. A few years ago, this industry hit us hard. We never thought our area would be a hot spot for the Texas solar. We started with one of the largest solar farms in America. Now we have 4 in our area and in our back door. It will employ 7 to 1,000 panel installers, electricians, just in our southern part of our jurisdiction. It's unbelievable, and it's growing like, I don't know what you want to call it. We had to team up with you, Bo, our Texas Climate Jobs Project, our Workforce Solutions, our community groups in the cities, the towns, their local politicians, where the projects are being located. This is so important to us, to having the community support these projects. And one way we're getting their support is by employing the community. It's unbelievable. Just from my office to the tip of the southern part of it, it's almost a 2-hour drive. In the Bay City to Port Lavaca, we're actually reaching out there, putting up signs. It's unbelievable. You asked, what are we doing to seize the moment? We're trying to do everything as possible to seize this moment. You mentioned earlier about wind farms. We haven't even touched that, and they're growing in our area. The offshore wind farm, unbelievable what's coming through our area. A little bit of backstory. When I met Bo a couple years ago, I said, who is this crazy guy that is teaching us and trying to show us and tell us what we should be doing? Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're not working with the Texas Climate Job Project, you really, really need to. They are unbelievable. They have introduced so many new things to us. It's unbelievable. They're actually helping us getting our apprentices involved. With Boehm, he actually introduced us to the now new director for Boehm, which hopefully we can get a pretty good relationship with them so we can get this offshore wind. Thank you, Bo, for everything you've done. You've actually introduced us to other organizations, which we would have never been here if it wasn't for you. And I greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We are as powerful as our advisory board, and it's been so incredible to work with everybody up here on the panel. Let me close by saying this. First of all, let's give it up for our panel. Thank y'all so much. What a cool group of people that are working on this work for all kinds of different reasons. There is so much promise in these new industries. We're in the middle of a revolution in Texas with new jobs. Some of the industries that were mentioned, 5,000 jobs in offshore wind, 40,000 jobs in hydrogen, even more in retrofitting and utility scale solar and wind. So we are seizing the moment because the decisions we make now are going to be felt for decades to come. And so we're so honored to get to work with so many of you in this room. And if you feel so inclined to think there may be a way we can work together, come find me after the panel and we can talk. I really appreciate y'all. And thank you so much to all the unions on our advisory board. And again, let's give it up for the panel. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna get a water. I'm getting a water. Thank you, Rick.